You didn't find this message by accident. And I don't say that in the shallow, decorative way people often do. I mean it in the deepest psychological sense. When something like this reaches you at this precise moment in your life, it is usually because something inside you is already awake enough to recognize it. Long before the conscious mind catches up, the inner world begins to shift. You may not have words for it yet, but you feel it as restlessness, as dissatisfaction with what once felt acceptable, as a quiet pressure that says something must change. That pressure is not anxiety without purpose. It is the psyche announcing that an old structure can no longer hold what you are becoming. Most people live their lives responding only to external events, believing change starts when circumstances improve. But real transformation begins internally, often long before any visible sign appears. When you reach a turning point like this, life starts sending signals, conversations that linger in your mind, ideas that disturb your comfort, messages that feel as if they are speaking directly to you. These are not coincidences. They are reflection. They appear when the inner and outer worlds begin to align around the same truth. Life you have been living is no longer sufficient for the person you are meant to be. You may feel as though you are standing between two versions of yourself. The old one is familiar, predictable, even if it is painful. The new one is unclear, undefined, and therefore frightening. This is why turning points feel uncomfortable. They demand that you loosen your grip on identity. They ask you to admit that what once worked no longer does. And the mind resists this admission because it equates the known with safety, but the psyche knows better. It knows that stagnation, not uncertainty, is the real threat. If this found you, it is likely because the inner tension has reached a level where ignoring it is no longer possible. You may notice that distractions don't work the way they used to. Achievements feel hollow. Relationships feel misaligned. Even rest doesn't fully restore you. This is not because something is wrong with you. It is because something within you is demanding a deeper life. The soul does not ask politely forever. Eventually it interrupts. This moment is not about sudden motivation or blind optimism. It is about recognition. Recognition that the old answers no longer satisfy the questions you are asking. Recognition that you are outgrowing patterns you once depended on. Recognition that the future you sense requires a different internal posture, more honesty, more courage, more responsibility for your own becoming. When this recognition dawns, life responds by placing you in contact with ideas and messages that mirror it back to you, as if to say, yes, you are not imagining this. Many people misunderstand these moments and rush to change everything externally. They quit, escape, distract, or seek constant reassurance. But the real work at a turning point is internal orientation. It is learning to listen inwardly rather than react outwardly. It is allowing the discomfort to teach you rather than silence you. Because what you are experiencing is not chaos, it is reorganization. The psyche is clearing space for something larger, more integrated, more aligned with your deeper nature. This is why this message matters now, and not 5 years ago, and not 5 years from now. There is a readiness present, not perfection, not certainty, but readiness. You have lived enough, endured enough, and reflected enough to understand that repeating the same patterns will only produce the same outcomes. That understanding is power. It is the quiet power of awareness, and awareness is always the first step toward transformation. As 2026 approaches, what begins now is not an external promise but an internal commitment. A commitment to stop betraying what you know is true. A commitment to take your inner light seriously. A commitment to allow change to begin at the level of thought, belief, and self-perception. When that commitment is made, life rearranges itself accordingly, not instantly, not magically, but inevitably. This is why the best years of a person's life are rarely born from comfort. They are born from moments like this, when the old self loosens its grip and the new self quietly steps forward. If this reached you, it is because that step has already begun, whether you fully realize it yet or not. And once that inner turning point is crossed, there is no real way back, only forward, into a year that reflects who you have finally decided to become. There is a question most people ask in moments of deep pain, though they rarely say it out loud. Why did this have to happen to me? And beneath that question is an even more unsettling fear that the suffering was meaningless, that it was random, that it served no purpose other than to wound. But when you look at life through a deeper psychological lens, pain rarely arrives without function. It arrives when something within you must be strengthened, clarified, or stripped down to its essence. What you endured was not an error in your story, it was the shaping of your capacity. When life begins to press hard, it often feels personal, as though you have been singled out for punishment. Loss arrives, plans collapse, people leave, uncertainty dissolves. In those moments, the mind searches desperately for stability, for something familiar to hold on to. But what if the very things that fell away were never meant to accompany you into the next stage of your life? What if the pressure you felt was not life trying to break you, but life testing whether you could stand without the supports that no longer matched your growth? Suffering has a way of forcing honesty. It removes the luxury of illusion. When things are going well, we can pretend we are fine with compromises, pretend we are aligned with paths that don't truly fulfill us, pretend we are stronger or happier than we are. Pain makes pretending impossible. It brings you face to face with your limits, your fears, your unresolved wounds. And while that confrontation is uncomfortable, it is also profoundly transformative. You cannot become something new while clinging to what you were when the world was easier. Think back to what you survived. The nights when sleep didn't come easily. The moments when you questioned your own worth, the times you felt invisible, unheard, or misunderstood. Each of those experiences demanded something from you: patience, endurance, self-reliance, reflection. You did not choose these lessons, but you learned them nonetheless, and in learning them, you developed an inner strength that comfort could never have taught you. What makes this period of pain so deceptive is that its results are largely invisible while you are in it. You don't feel stronger while you are surviving. You feel tired. You don't feel wiser while you are grieving. You feel lost. Only later, when life asks something of you again, do you realize how much you have changed. You respond differently. You tolerate less. You see more clearly. This is the quiet evidence that the pain was doing its work all along. Preparation does not always feel like preparation. Often it feels like delay, like rejection, like repeated disappointment. But preparation is about capacity. It is about expanding the inner space needed to hold what is coming next. Without that expansion, blessings become burdens, and opportunities become overwhelming. The life that awaits you requires a version of you who has depth, resilience, and self-knowledge. The version of you before the pain may not have been able to sustain it. This is why those who have suffered deeply often carry a certain gravity about them. They listen differently. They choose more carefully. They are less impressed by surface-level success and more attuned to what is real. That gravity is not bitterness, it is earned weight. It comes from having been tested and not turning away from the test. Even when you felt broken, some part of you stayed present, stayed observing, stayed learning. That part is now stronger than you realize. As 2026 approaches, the significance of what you endured will begin to reveal itself in subtle but undeniable ways. You will find that situations that once overwhelmed you no longer do. Decisions that once confused you feel clearer. Boundaries that once felt impossible to enforce now feel necessary. This is not coincidence. This is preparation expressing itself through behavior. You are not being punished. You are being shaped. And shaping is rarely gentle. It requires pressure, resistance, and time. The stone does not become smooth by accident, and the self does not become integrated without friction. What matters is not that you suffered, but that you did not abandon yourself while you were suffering. And when you look back from the vantage point of what is about to unfold, you will understand that the hardest seasons of your life were not detours, they were the training ground that made you ready for the year that changes everything. There comes a moment in life when things begin to fall away, not all at once, but steadily enough that you cannot ignore the pattern. People who once felt essential drift into distance. Habits that once soothed you begin to feel empty. Places that once felt like home start to feel confining, and the instinctive response is to panic, to cling, to ask what you did wrong. But separation, when viewed deeply, is not always a sign of failure. Very often, it is a sign of alignment beginning to take place. What is leaving your life now is not doing so to punish you. It is leaving because it no longer corresponds to the direction your inner life is taking. Growth is not additive, it is selective. You do not simply collect new layers, you shed old ones. And shedding is uncomfortable because it asks you to release what is familiar before the replacement fully appears. The mind resists this phase intensely because it prefers certainty over truth. Yet the psyche knows that remaining connected to what no longer fits will eventually suffocate your development. You may notice that certain relationships feel strained without any dramatic conflict. Conversations no longer flow. Shared values quietly diverge. There is nothing overtly wrong, yet something essential is missing. This is often the most confusing kind of separation because it lacks a clear reason you can point to. But meaning does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers through disconnection. When inner growth accelerates, outer bonds that cannot expand with it naturally loosen. The same is true of habits and environments. What once provided comfort may now feel dull or even draining. You might find yourself less tolerant of noise, chaos, superficiality, or constant stimulation. This is not you becoming difficult or ungrateful. It is you becoming attuned. The psyche refines its needs as it matures. What once nourished you may now merely distract you from what you are meant to confront within yourself. This phase often brings a sense of loneliness, even when you are surrounded by others. It is a peculiar loneliness, the feeling of being psychologically out of sync rather than physically alone, and it can tempt you to return to old patterns simply to escape the discomfort. But doing so would be a kind of betrayal, because the discomfort is signaling that your inner compass has recalibrated. You are being asked to trust that signal rather than silence it. Separation is rarely dramatic. More often, it is quiet and gradual. It happens through unanswered messages, fading enthusiasm, subtle disengagement, and because it is subtle, people often invalidate it, telling themselves they are overthinking or being unreasonable. But the inner life is precise. When something no longer aligns, it withdraws energy from it. Attention wanes. Desire fades. Meaning dissolves. These are not accidents, they are indicators. What makes this stage so difficult is that the new has not yet fully arrived. You are between worlds. The old is dissolving, and the future remains undefined. This liminal space can feel unsettling, as though you are floating without ground beneath your feet. But it is precisely in this space that reorientation occurs. Without the noise of misaligned attachments, you begin to hear yourself more clearly. Your values sharpen. Your priorities clarify. Your tolerance for self-deception diminishes. As 2026 approaches, this separation will reveal its deeper purpose. You are being cleared for connections, opportunities, and experiences that require a different level of presence. Carrying what no longer fits would make it impossible to receive what does. Life does not simply give, it prepares, and preparation often looks like subtraction. There is also an important psychological truth here. You cannot become who you are meant to be while remaining loyal to who you used to be. Loyalty to the past can become a form of resistance. It keeps you bound to identities, roles, and expectations that no longer reflect your inner reality. Letting go of them may feel like loss, but in truth, it is liberation disguised as grief. If you find yourself being separated, trust that this is not rejection, it is redirection. What is moving away is creating space, and space is not emptiness, it is potential. It is the silent invitation for something more aligned to enter. The year ahead does not need you to be surrounded by everything you once had. It needs you to be aligned with what truly belongs. And when you finally look back, you will see that what left was not taken from you, it was released, so you could step fully into the life that is now making room for you. For a long time, you were taught directly or indirectly to avoid certain parts of yourself. To stay positive, to be strong, to move on quickly, to not dwell too much on anger, fear, grief, or doubt. These parts were labeled as weaknesses, as flaws to be corrected or hidden, and so you learned to push them down, to distract yourself when they surfaced, to judge yourself for having them at all. But what you resist internally does not disappear. It waits, and eventually it demands to be seen. At some point, whether by choice or by necessity, you stopped running. Perhaps life slowed you down. Perhaps loss cornered you. Perhaps exhaustion made avoidance impossible. And in that stillness, the parts you had kept in the dark began to speak. Fear was no longer just fear. It had a story. Anger was no longer destructive. It was pointing to violated boundaries. Grief was no longer something to escape. It was love that had nowhere else to go. Doubt was no longer an enemy. It was asking for truth. This is where real integration begins, not by erasing these parts, but by listening to them. Integration does not mean indulging every impulse or becoming consumed by emotion. It means acknowledging what is there without judgment, without denial. When you allow yourself to experience these inner states consciously, they lose their power to control you unconsciously. What was once projected onto the world, blame, resentment, suspicion, begins to return inward as understanding. This process is not comfortable. To sit with your own shadow is to confront the gap between who you thought you were and who you actually are. It means admitting that you are capable of fear and courage, selfishness and generosity, darkness and light. But this admission is not a defeat. It is the foundation of wholeness. Only a fragmented self needs to pretend. A whole self can afford honesty. You may have noticed that as you began to accept these hidden aspects, something changed in how you move through the world. You became less reactive, less defensive, less eager to prove yourself. When you know your own darkness, you are not threatened by it in others. When you accept your own imperfections, you no longer need to maintain a false image. This is the quiet strength that comes from integration. Before this, much of your energy was spent in internal conflict, fighting thoughts, suppressing emotions, resisting memories. That conflict is exhausting. It drains vitality and clouds perception. But as integration takes place, that energy is released. What once went into inner warfare becomes available for creativity, clarity, and presence. You begin to act not from compulsion, but from choice. This is why you now sense a deeper authority within yourself. Not arrogance, not rigidity, but groundedness. You trust your perceptions more. You hesitate less before making decisions that honor your values. You no longer need constant validation, because you are no longer at war with yourself. The integrated self does not seek approval, it seeks alignment. As 2026 approaches, this inner wholeness becomes your greatest asset. Challenges will still arise, but they will no longer destabilize you in the same way. You have already faced the most unsettling terrain, the hidden corners of your own psyche. External obstacles feel different when you are no longer fragmented internally. You respond rather than react. You choose rather than collapse. There is also a deep compassion that emerges from this work. Having encountered your own suffering honestly, you recognize it in others without judgment. You listen more. You project less. You understand that everyone is wrestling with parts of themselves they barely comprehend. This does not make you passive, it makes you precise. You know when to engage and when to step back. You know when to offer empathy and when to maintain boundaries. Integration does not make life easy, but it makes it real. And real life, though complex, is far more fulfilling than a life built on avoidance and illusion. You are no longer chasing idealized version of yourself. You are inhabiting the one you actually are fully, consciously, and responsibly. This is why what lies ahead is not built on denial or fantasy. It is built on self-knowledge. And a life built on self-knowledge has depth, resilience, and direction. Because when you stop running from yourself, you finally have the strength to move forward. Transformation rarely announces itself with fanfare. It does not always come as a dramatic event or a loud external shift. More often, it unfolds quietly, imperceptibly, in ways that are easy to overlook if you are expecting spectacle. You wake up one day and notice that your reactions have changed. Choices that once felt urgent no longer do. Opinions that once triggered you leave only curiosity behind. This is the subtle work of a new identity forming beneath the surface, silently reshaping your approach to life. This new version of you is not constructed overnight. It grows out of the lessons you have endured, the shallows you have faced, and the patience you have cultivated through suffering. Every challenge, every loss, every quiet moment of reflection has contributed to this emerging self. You may not feel it fully yet because it does not need your conscious approval to grow. It operates in the background, shifting your nervous system, your perception, your internal rules, until one day you act differently without knowing why. One of the most profound aspects of this quiet transformation is that it is often invisible to those around you. Friends, colleagues, even family may notice subtle changes in your demeanor, but they cannot perceive the internal recalibration that is taking place. You may still be in the same environment, facing similar circumstances, yet your response to them is increasingly informed by a deeper sense of alignment. This is why personal evolution often feels lonely. It is intimate work, largely unseen, and entirely internal. The formation of a new identity requires the shedding of old scripts. The old self was shaped by expectations, fears, and conditioned patterns that once served a purpose but now constrain growth. You may find that certain habits, routines, or even relationships no longer resonate. What once brought comfort or a sense of belonging may now feel limiting or hollow. This is not a flaw or a moral failing. It is evidence that the self you are becoming is larger than the self you were and cannot be contained by the old frameworks. A crucial aspect of this process is self-trust. The new identity forms in the spaces where you stop seeking validation from others and begin to rely on your own internal guidance. You notice what aligns with your values, what energizes you, and what feels authentic, even if it contradicts external expectations. Decision-making becomes quieter, more intuitive. You no longer act from obligation or fear of judgment, but from a sense of internal coherence that is both stabilizing and empowering. As this transformation solidifies, you may observe a shift in how you perceive the world. Situations that once felt overwhelming are now navigable. Challenges that previously provoked anxiety are now met with calm assessment. The lens through which you view life becomes more expansive, more inclusive of complexity, and less dependent on superficial markers of success or approval. You are learning to respond rather than react, to engage rather than retreat. This emergent identity also brings with it an increased tolerance for ambiguity. Where once certainty and control were essential, you now recognize that life is dynamic, unpredictable, and often paradoxical. The new self does not need every question answered immediately. It can sit with uncertainty and still act decisively when necessary. This is not passivity. It is a deeper, more refined form of strength, one born of experience, reflection, and a willingness to grow beyond old limitations. In parallel, you may notice a change in your emotional resilience. The new self is less easily destabilized by external events. While feelings are still felt deeply, they are no longer allowed to dictate your actions unconsciously. You respond from observation rather than impulse. You act from clarity rather than reaction. And this shift, though subtle, transforms not only your internal life, but the way you are perceived externally. People begin to sense a groundedness, a quiet authority, a consistency that is attractive and stabilizing. The process is gradual and it is continuous. Transformation is not a final destination but a trajectory. The new identity does not arrive fully formed, it develops through daily decisions, small adjustments in perception, and the repeated choice to act in alignment with your emerging self. Each moment of conscious engagement with life reinforces the new pattern, strengthening the foundations of this evolving identity. As 2026 approaches, the significance of this quiet formation cannot be overstated. You are entering a period in which your actions will increasingly reflect this new self. Opportunities, relationships, and experiences will respond to the person you have become, not the person you used to be. What is arriving is not a change in circumstance alone, it is a shift in the lens through which you navigate those circumstances. The new year will reward you for the work that has been invisible but relentless, for the version of you that has been quietly taking shape in the background. And once you begin to act consistently from this emerging self, life aligns in ways that feel inevitable. The old patterns no longer hold sway, and the possibilities that once seemed distant now appear as natural extensions of who you are. This is the power of a new identity forming quietly. It transforms both your inner world and your external reality without the fanfare, without the noise, and without the need for external validation, because the person you are becoming has already begun moving you toward the life you are meant to live. There is a subtle frustration that accompanies growth, one that most people fail to recognize until much later. You may have spent years waiting for change, hoping for progress, longing for the life you imagined. Opportunities seemed delayed, dreams felt just out of reach. Doors appeared closed when you were ready to walk through them. In those moments, it is easy to assume that life is unfair, that your timing is flawed, or that you are simply unlucky. But what often feels like delay is not postponement at all, it is preparation. The universe, or the unfolding of life itself, has a timing that is far more intricate than our conscious mind can perceive. What we see as stagnation is often a hidden period of alignment, a quiet work of integration that prepares you to receive what is coming. Just as a tree must endure winter before spring, and as a seed must remain buried before it can sprout, the delays in your life are not failures but stages of maturation. There is intelligence in the timing of life, even when it feels invisible and even when impatience tempts you to act recklessly. Consider the frustrations you have endured over the past months or years. How many times have you wanted answers, opportunities, or success to arrive sooner than they did? And yet, when those moments finally did appear, were you prepared to handle them fully? Often, we rush to receive what we are not yet ready to hold. Life, in its wisdom, waits until the vessel is capable before delivering the content. That unseen preparation is what gives experiences their impact and their lasting power. Without it, even blessings can feel overwhelming or squandered. Patience in this context is not passive waiting. It is active cultivation. It is working inwardly, while the outward world seems static. It is learning, refining, and strengthening the aspects of yourself that will determine how you respond when change arrives. Often, the most significant growth occurs beneath the surface, in ways that cannot be measured by immediate results. You may feel invisible progress, but that progress is occurring nonetheless, shaping your perceptions, your choices, and your resilience. This hidden work is sometimes uncomfortable because it tests your trust. You may feel that nothing is happening, that your efforts are futile, that the universe is indifferent. And yet, in that period of quiet, unseen preparation, you are being stretched in exactly the ways required to handle the life you are about to enter. What you once considered delays are actually life's way of synchronizing your internal readiness with external opportunity. Timing is not a flaw, it is precision. The longer you resist or fight against this unseen preparation, the more painful it becomes. You might attempt to force outcomes, to accelerate the process, to bypass the necessary steps. But when you try to shortcut growth, life responds with resistance. Opportunities may appear, but you may feel inadequate or unprepared. Relationships may unfold, but they may strain under the weight of your unready self. The lesson is clear: the work done in waiting is just as important as the action that follows. There is also a transformative insight in recognizing that what seemed delayed was never truly absent. Often, what appears postponed is simply invisible, manifesting quietly in ways that prepare you to receive it fully. Skills are honed, understanding deepens, awareness expands, and your capacity for endurance grows. All of this forms the foundation for a more powerful engagement with life when the moment finally arrives. The delays were not obstacles, they were the scaffolding of your readiness. In parallel, these periods of apparent waiting teach you discernment. You begin to distinguish between what is essential and what is superfluous. You learn to focus your energy on growth that matters, to conserve your strength for challenges that align with your purpose. The external stillness is mirrored by internal sharpening. This is why life's delays, though frustrating, are rarely wasted. They refine your character and clarify your trajectory. As 2026 approaches, it becomes clear that the timing of events in your life has been perfectly orchestrated, even if it did not feel that way at the time. You are arriving at a point where opportunity and readiness coincide. The experiences that once seemed delayed will now appear as if they were inevitable, natural extensions of the preparation you have undergone. The patience, endurance, and introspection that felt burdensome are now the very qualities that allow you to receive fully what is coming. And there is a subtle beauty in this process. You learn that life does not rush, and neither should you. You come to understand that what matters is not how fast you reach a goal, but how fully you are equipped when it arrives. The